As a brand new parent, you want nothing more than to give your newborn the best start to life. But what many of us parents don't realize is that even the most normal birth process puts tremendous amounts of physical stress on your baby's delicate body, and particularly their brainstem, their neck, and their nervous system. In the United States, we are now trending to nearly 1 in 3 deliveries by 2030 ending in a C-section. And on top of that, the amount of births that involve other potentially harmful interventions like induction, forceps, and vacuum, and other forms of manual assistance are quite staggering once you really open the hood and look at what's really going on with labor, delivery, and modern medicine in this country and other developed countries as well. And it's not just that birth interventions can cause this concern. Honestly, even natural intervention-free births or natural labor and the physical stress that comes from those can place significant pressure on an infant's spine, neck, and delicate nervous system. And this subtle kind of normalized birth trauma can lead to neurological interference and misalignments called subluxations, which can show up really early and then lead to trouble down the road with development, immune function, you name it. Those first few weeks with your newborn can be very challenging if birth trauma and subluxation sets in. Constant crying, difficulty nursing, sleep struggles, reflux, colic. Conventional medicine and the pediatrician are likely going to dismiss these as normal baby problems that they'll grow out of. But what if your gut is telling you something more is going on? What if there really is a nervous system dysfunction or challenge like subluxation underneath the surface? For so many of us parents, we want to give our kids that best start. And addressing this birth trauma and nervous system dysfunction is a huge first step in doing exactly that. This video is for expectant parents and parents of newborns who want to give their babies the best possible start in life, free from the effects of birth trauma and nervous system dysfunction that could negatively impact their health and development. In this one, I'm going to explain how birth trauma affects your baby's delicate, developing nervous system and why those normal baby problems might actually be signs of nervous system dysfunction, and how neurologically focused pediatric chiropractic care can help address these issues before they develop into chronic health challenges and developmental delays that can follow your child for years. Let's dig in a little bit. In a study done by the American Osteopathic Association, the incidence of what's known as somatic dysfunction, subluxation, was found in 99% of healthy newborns when they checked them after birth. And the severity and incidence of these biomechanical challenges within their spine and cranial system increased with longer labor and more interventions like we just discussed. And while that 99% number can be quite staggering, considering we are talking about something that the conventional pediatrician has absolutely no training on and no clue about, we've noticed the exact same results in our practice. Even children born naturally at home in a birthing tub without intervention can benefit massively from early life chiropractic checkups and an exam that looks for these subluxations or somatic dysfunctions and neurological interference. The reason it's so important to find these dysfunctions so early is that they not only cause issues with latching, nursing, digestion, sleeping, smoothing, and so forth right at that moment in life, but they are not something the child grows out of. Instead, due to their location within the neurospinal system, the brainstem, we're going to talk about the vagus nerve here in a second, it's very common for these subluxations and dysfunctions to start to interfere with gross motor development, fine motor, speech, and all sorts of other sensory and physiological functions down the road. All right, so I know for many of you, this is a new, novel, never heard of it before approach to taking care of your infant and your family and your kiddos. So I want to really take the time to break down a few very important scientific elements as to why this is so important, what subluxation really is and does, and how chiropractic can step in safely, gently, and effectively. So the first thing I want you to know is that infants, brand new babies, cannot protect their head and neck. This is really simple. Really, this whole conversation is when you have a brand new baby, it's your first baby, and you take this beautiful brand new baby who has no motor control whatsoever, including of their head and neck, which will develop first, we'll get to that next, and you hand said baby to your little brother or an uncle or someone, really anyone, but especially someone who's never held a baby before. What do you say? Hold the head, hold the head, hold the head, support the neck, support the neck, support the neck. We all know this. You don't need this video or a deep dive into the neuroscience of subluxation, nervous system dysfunction, and the vagus nerve, which we're going to talk about next, to know that the head and neck of a baby, of everyone, but especially a baby since they can't protect it yet, is the most important part. Now, you may not have gone through all the neurophysiological classes and neurodevelopmental classes like us to know that, hey, that's the brainstem, that's the cerebellum, that's the vagus nerve. That is where all sensory, motor, physiological function is controlled and coordinated. But that's actually the truth. That's why the head and neck is so important. So the first thing to know is that infants cannot protect themselves from forceps, from vacuum, from this manual assistance and C-section deliveries. And if they could, maybe it would lessen the subluxation, the tension, the misalignment a little bit. But even if they could, there's so much physical twisting, yanking, pulling at birth that these subluxations, these misalignments, these neurological dysfunctions are going to set in at the most delicate, important part of the spine and the nervous system. And then it gets even more important because the next thing we need to know about subluxation is it's got three components. First two are kind of the biomechanical, or call them the physical parts. So when that child is pulled and then twisted, so like a C-section, they got to pull the head and neck out, and then they, using their hands, I'm sorry to describe it to you this way, but it's very, very true, they then yank and twist. It's called axial traction. So there's all sorts of pulling on the neck, the spinal cord, the brainstem, and the whole body, which is still inside mom. And then the head and neck are pulled up through the incision, and then they've got to twist to get the shoulders and the torso out. Now, when this happens in a natural, unintervention birth, mom's nerves, muscles, pelvic floor are incredibly, amazingly guiding this. But again, when intervention comes in, now the doctor, the hands, the forceps, the vacuum are taking over. And there's so much twisting and pulling. So the first two components of subluxation are misalignment. And once you have a misalignment of these cranial bones and these vertebrae, especially what's called the atlas and axis vertebrae, which protects, the reason it's called the atlas is it holds up the weight of the world. The brain and the brainstem are the most important part. So that's why anatomically it's been given that nickname, most important vertebrae and part of the body by far. And so when atlas and axis and all these bones get misaligned, they become fixated. They become stuck. A severe example of this is what's known as torticollis, where your baby's head and neck is stuck to one side, plagiocephaly, where the head starts to get flattened. And in really rough traumatic births, there can even be collarbones that are broke, or shoulders that are distended and separated, or what's called a brachial plexus injury, where these nerves and different palsies, which means the nerves are so injured that the muscles become shut down and atrophied. And again, if we can actually get pediatric chiropractic intervention into these infants right at birth, we can actually take care of all that stuff. Erb's palsy, we've seen so many cases resolved. So there's misalignment, then there's fixation, and the third component of subluxation is neurological interference. And that's where we really break it down further, because the brainstem, upper neck, and that neurospinal regions are in charge of motor, so muscle, tone, control, and coordination. So we mentioned just a bit ago that infants cannot protect their head and neck. Well, that's a big deal, because head and neck control are essential for latching, turning, getting that nutrition in from mom. It's a very two-way conversation of neuromuscular, neurosensory function for successful health, nourishing, co-regulation, breastfeeding, bonding, and nourishment. And so first thing that gets thrown off with this motor dysfunction and subluxation is the ability to latch and swallow and move the head and neck. Well, if we don't get head and neck development to occur appropriately and first and fully and in a very symmetrical and balanced way, now it starts this whole cascade we call the perfect storm, where all sensory motor, gross motor, so the big muscles, and then fine motor later on, so speech, communication, and even socialization and behavioral regulation is all governed and modulated by the brainstem. So often a child may not get a sensory or an autism or an ADHD diagnosis until age 2 or 3 or even older. But again and again and again, in fact, 85 to 90% of the time in those conditions, we come back to a deep dive root cause case history in our consultation and in our paperwork, and we find that that child had birth intervention and birth trauma to the brainstem, aka subluxation and nervous system dysfunction. That brainstem region is air traffic control for all motor development, tone, coordination. Motor movement is life. We do know, even the pediatrician and traditional therapy teams will be very clear to say motor sequential development is essential to brain development, behavior, speech, communication. So when we throw that off with subluxation, misalignment, fixation, and neurological interference, well, we throw everything off downstream. And that's why we call it the perfect storm. And we're almost done, but unfortunately, there's more problems from this upper cervical and neurospinal subluxation. Those are the same nerves that not only control latching, motor function, they control sleep, they control digestion, they control ear, nose, throat draining, they control respiration, they control immune system modulation, including the coordination of inflammation. And so what happens when kiddos have these traumatic births and these interventions, they also get sick all the time with chronic ear infections, croup, RSV, upper respiratory challenges. They get thrown off with their sensory, with their speech, with their balance, with their coordination. And so when we say that the upper cervical and brainstem area is air traffic control, it's not just for the muscles, it's for every single physiological and important system of the body. And that's why colic, reflux, constipation, sleep challenges, immune issues, and then they throw antibiotics on top of those chronic ear infections. And then it's the toddler who has constant meltdowns, and they say, oh, just like for the ear infections, don't worry, they'll grow out of it. Or just like for the colic, don't worry, they'll grow out of it. They don't. Subluxation, if it's still there under the hood from birth trauma, and you still haven't had your toddler or young child checked by a chiropractor to find it, they don't grow out of those things. They grow into these other conditions. And the pediatrician just continues to punt the issue instead of look for the real root cause in the most important system in the body, the nervous system, and the most important location or region of nervous system protection and regulation, which is the brainstem, the upper neck, and the entire spine. So these normal baby problems are not something that they grow out of, as we say, and have we've known with the science and our practice experience for now 20 years, they grow into the perfect storm and challenges like autism, ADHD, anxiety, autoimmune challenges, asthma, allergies, you name it. And so what we do and the way we want to really bring this video home for you is not only do you deserve to know, hey, birth interventions, birth trauma, subluxation, nervous system dysfunction, that study, 99%, 99 out of these 99 out of 100 infants had this issue. It has to be checked. It has to be found. So talking about it is very important, but finding it and making safe, gentle adjustments to do something about it is even more important. So what I want to do at the end of this video is I want to show you the technology. So these are called neurothermal scans. We are able to actually very safely, so these thermal scans are just reading nervous system dysfunction, subluxation, what's called dysautonomia, and vagus nerve dysfunction. So this scan here is on an infant who had a very traumatic birth. There was a failed vacuum extraction. So they did all the pulling and all the twisting. It didn't work, and then ended an emergency C-section. So you see all sorts, where you see all this color is all of that dysfunction and subluxation within the system. And this infant has multiple layers. The more color, the more disruption, the more severity. This child was not latching, not nursing, not sleeping, not pooping. This was colic, really honestly times 10. And this is where this little one, so this is early August last year, and then this is early September. So after just 12 adjustments and 1 month of care, this area down here controls the gut. You can see how much more calm and smooth that was. So in good, now this child was pooping easy. This area controls the nerves that would control the esophagus and kind of the upper third to 2/3 of digestion. So the reflux and that frustration was gone. And while we still had a little bit of work to do to get the original site of birth trauma and injury, so this is where the vagus nerve and that air traffic control really is, we still had some work to do to clear it out. It was so much better than when we began. So this child's torticollis, their mood, this went from the grumpiest, unhappy, nervous system stressed to the max baby over here on the left, to a much happier, much calmer, much more regulated infant there on the right in just 1 month's time. And then a month later, or 6 weeks later, when we did the next scan, we were able to get rid of that upper cervical tension and subluxation altogether. And that little one is now thriving. Met all their milestones, all the torticollis, all the plagiocephaly, all the colic and constipation, ear infections were already brewing. All of that is gone, which is the best thing ever. But the most important thing is that now that child is simply thriving, because our kids aren't supposed to be sick. Having all these challenges isn't normal. Having all these interventions may absolutely positively be life-saving at birth. Medicine, from C-section to induction to vacuum to epidural to you name it, is so life-saving for mom and baby when used appropriately. But we know the science is clear and has been for actually quite a long time now that we are way overusing these medical interventions, just like pretty much any other department in medicine. It's been turned into a business, and it's way too much, and it's way too overused, and it's not without harm. These birth interventions have real side effects to them, short and long term, for our infants and for our children, just like any other medication or medical intervention. They may be life-saving, but even in those cases, they can be life-altering. And so I know I went in depth with this video about something that may seem so simple. Oh, it's a brand new baby. How the heck would chiropractic come involved there? Well, if you just, and if you really need to, we didn't put it in this one, go to YouTube, because yes, these are the days where everything is on YouTube. Go to YouTube and watch a C-section delivery. Go to our website and read the article all about C-sections. I'll have the team link it either with this video or up in our bio. Or you can just go to our website and search for C-section birth trauma, and we'll show you videos of how much physical strain and stress is put on those infants' delicate neck and nervous system right away at birth. We can find that. We can adjust that. We can correct and clear those subluxations and that nervous system dysfunction. And it doesn't take any more pressure than what you would check the ripeness of a tomato or an avocado. Infant adjustments are entirely, vastly, massively different than regular back pain, neck pain, adult adjustments you may have experienced before yourself, thought of, or worst case scenario, seen on TikTok or Instagram. Adjusting an infant is the simplest, safest, gentlest, most specific, especially when you go to our office or a pxdoc, and we use this technology and what are called neurotonal protocols. It's unbelievably safe. It's unbelievably effective and life transformative. And if you need more information, simply comment below, send us a DM, make your way over to the website to find more articles about newborn and infant chiropractic, about our clinical protocols, the scans, the safety. It's all there. Anything you need to get your little one on the healthiest, best start, especially if they had a tough start with birth intervention and physical injury and trauma to the neck and the brainstem, reach out to us and we'll make sure we get connected to you and your little one to get this problem taken care of, instead of just say, don't worry, they'll grow out of it. We will handle it.